I spent 37 years married to Richard Thompson, watching him build his import-export business from a single shipping container to a network spanning 3 continents. When he died 18 months ago, everyone assumed I'd sell my shares and retire to some quiet life of gardening and book clubs. Everyone except me. The morning of Richard's funeral, his business partner Robert pulled me aside in the church parking lot. I remember the way he squeezed my shoulder, his voice dropping to that careful tone people use around widows. "Maggie, I know this is hard, but we need to talk about the company. The paperwork, the contracts, it's all very complicated. I can handle everything, don't worry. We'll figure out a fair buyout once you've had time to grieve." I nodded, too numb to process what he was really saying, too tired to notice the eagerness behind his sympathy. Richard and I had met in college. He was studying international business. I was in art history. Our friends used to joke that we were proof opposites attract. While he built spreadsheets and learned market trends, I ran a small gallery downtown, sold paintings to tourists, lived in my world of colors and textures. He handled the numbers, I handled the beauty. It worked for us. Or so I thought. After he died, I spent 3 months in a fog. The house felt too big, too quiet. I'd find myself making 2 cups of coffee in the morning, setting 2 places at dinner. His office sat untouched, exactly as he'd left it the morning of his heart attack, papers still spread across his desk like he might walk back in at any moment. Robert called every week, always helpful, always concerned. He'd update me on the business, explain that things were complicated right now, that the China contracts needed attention, that maybe it was time we discussed my exit strategy. "These things are boring, Maggie. Technical. You'd hate the meetings, all the numbers and logistics. Let me take care of it. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Something about the way he said "taken care of" made my stomach turn. I started going through Richard's files, not looking for anything specific at first, just touching things he'd touched, reading his handwriting in the margins of contracts. He'd always been meticulous, noting everything. And in those notes, I began to see patterns I'd never noticed before. The China deals, the manufacturing partnerships, the shipping arrangements, they weren't just numbers on a page. They were relationships Richard had spent decades building, personal connections, trust earned over years of fair dealing. And in his notes, written in his careful script, Maggie's mother spoke Mandarin. "Mag understands more than she lets on. Smart woman, my wife, sees things I miss." I sat in his office for a long time after reading that, remembering my mother, Chinese American, speaking to her relatives in Mandarin while I pretended to ignore them, too young and too stubborn to appreciate my heritage. But I'd absorbed more than I realized, hadn't I? Richard knew. He'd always known. That's when I started listening to language podcasts at night when I couldn't sleep, watching Chinese news broadcasts, reading business articles in Mandarin, struggling at first, then finding the old patterns returning. It came back faster than I expected. Muscle memory from childhood dinner tables and family gatherings I'd taken for granted. I didn't tell Robert. Something told me to keep this to myself. 6 months after Richard's death, Robert started pushing harder about the buyout. He'd stop by the house with papers, point to lines where I needed to sign. "It's a generous offer, Maggie. Very fair. The business has been struggling. You know how it is with international trade right now. Better to get out while you can still get something." I'd smile, pour him tea, tell him I needed more time. His jaw would tighten just slightly before he'd force another smile. Of course. Take your time. But don't wait too long. These opportunities don't last forever." Then came the phone call. Robert, his voice bright with forced enthusiasm. "Great news, Maggie. I've arranged a meeting with the Liu family, our main manufacturers in Shenzhen. They're flying representatives here next month. I'll handle everything, of course, but I thought you should be there. Richard would want his wife to see the business he built. Just smile, be gracious, you know. I'll do all the talking." The Liu family. I remembered the name from Richard's notes. His most important relationship, built over 20 years of partnership, the backbone of the entire operation. That's thoughtful, Robert. I'd like that. Perfect. Wear something nice, but not too, flashy. Asian clients prefer modesty. And don't worry about understanding anything. It'll mostly be in Mandarin. Just be there for the photos. Show respect for Richard's memory. After he hung up, I sat very still, something cold settling in my chest. The next 3 weeks, I didn't just study Mandarin. I devoured everything I could find about Chinese business culture, about the Liu family's company, about trade regulations and import quotas. I read through every contract Richard had ever signed with them, understanding for the first time the depth of what he'd built. I also hired a lawyer, quietly, a good one specializing in business partnerships. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I kept running through scenarios, wondering if I was reading too much into Robert's tone, his eagerness, his insistence that I wouldn't understand. Maybe he was just trying to protect me. Maybe I was being paranoid. But Richard's voice echoed in my memory from a conversation years ago, something I hadn't thought about until now. Robert's a good partner, Maggie, but watch him if anything happens to me. He's ambitious, always has been. I keep him in check, but without me, he'd never finish that thought. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully. A simple navy suit, pearl earrings Richard had given me on our 20th anniversary, professional but understated. I looked like exactly what Robert expected, a widow playing dress-up in her late husband's world. Robert picked me up at 9. He was wearing a new suit, expensive, Italian, if I wasn't mistaken. He'd been doing well lately, apparently. "You look perfect, Maggie. Remember, just smile and nod. I've got this under control." The restaurant was downtown, one of those places where businessmen close deals over dim sum. Robert had reserved a private room, round table, everything arranged for maximum formality. Very appropriate for Chinese business culture. The Liu family sent 3 representatives: Mr. Liu Wei, the son of the founder and now CEO, Miss Chen, their head of operations, and a younger man introduced as Jason Liu, the founder's grandson, there to learn the business. They greeted us with the careful politeness of people who'd flown 12 hours for this meeting. I bowed slightly, shook hands, smiled graciously. Everything a respectful widow should do. Robert immediately took control. "Please, sit. Thank you so much for coming all this way. I know Mr. Thompson would have been honored." We settled around the table. Tea was poured. Small talk was exchanged in English, Robert leading the conversation with practiced ease. Then Mr. Liu Wei shifted to Mandarin, speaking to Miss Chen. Just a quiet comment about the tea, nothing important. Robert smiled blankly, nodded as if he understood. I kept my expression neutral, sipping my tea. "The tea is excellent," Mr. Liu Wei had said in Mandarin. "Traditional Longjing. Someone here knows quality." The conversation continued in English for a while. Robert presented his vision for the company, talked about expansion, new markets, increased profits. He was good at this, I had to admit. Confident. Commanding. "Of course," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "There have been some changes since Richard's passing. Mrs. Thompson has decided to step back from active involvement. She's generously offered to sell her shares, which gives us an opportunity to streamline operations." I felt every eye in the room turn to me. I kept my expression pleasant, almost vacant, just a widow nodding along to words she didn't quite understand. Mr. Liu Wei's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He turned to Miss Chen and spoke in Mandarin, his voice still polite but with an edge I wasn't supposed to catch. "He's lying. The wife doesn't know about this. Should we say something?" Miss Chen replied in Mandarin. "Wait. Watch," Robert continued, oblivious. "With Maggie's shares, I'll have controlling interest. We can move faster, make decisions without the delays of dual ownership. It's better for everyone." Jason Liu, the grandson, couldn't hide his frown. He leaned toward his uncle and whispered in Mandarin, "Grandfather wouldn't have partnered with someone like this. This isn't how Thompson-san did business." "No," Mr. Liu Wei agreed softly in Mandarin. "It isn't." Robert was still talking, pulling out projected earnings, growth charts. "I've been running things since Richard's death anyway. Maggie's been wonderful, but she doesn't understand the complexities. She's an art dealer, not a businesswoman. Richard handled everything, kept her sheltered from all this. That one stung, I won't lie. But I kept my face blank, my hands folded in my lap." Mr. Liu Wei set down his teacup, "And Mrs. Thompson agrees to this arrangement?" Oh, absolutely, Robert said smoothly. She trusts me to handle it. Don't you, Maggie? All eyes on me again. I smiled softly. I trust that Richard built something worth preserving. Robert's smile tightened just slightly. Of course, and we'll preserve it, under proper management. Miss Chen spoke up in Mandarin, addressing Mr. Lu Wei. This is disrespectful. We should leave. Patience, he replied in Mandarin. I want to see how far he'll go. And Robert went far. He spent the next 20 minutes essentially erasing Richard's legacy, reframing the business as his own creation, suggesting that Richard had been declining in his final years, that decisions had really been Robert's all along. I felt anger building, hot and tight in my chest. But I sat perfectly still, the overlooked widow, invisible in my own husband's company. Then Robert made his mistake. He leaned forward, lowering his voice confidentially, and switched to Mandarin. His Mandarin was terrible, heavily accented, but functional enough for what he needed to say. Between us, he said in clumsy Mandarin, the old woman doesn't understand business. She'll sign anything I put in front of her. Once I have control, we can renegotiate terms. More favorable terms, for both of us. The room went very quiet. Mr. Lu Wei's face remained impassive, but his eyes had gone cold. Renegotiate? We have a contract. Contracts can be adjusted, Robert continued in Mandarin, clearly thinking he was being clever. The old terms, they were too generous on your end. Thompson was soft, sentimental. I'm more practical. I watched Jason Lu's hands clench into fists. Miss Chen's expression had gone from professional to disgusted. Mr. Lu Wei simply stared at Robert with the kind of calm that's more frightening than anger. Robert, oblivious, kept going. She's sitting right there, doesn't understand a word we're saying. Perfect, isn't it? We can discuss real business without worrying about the widow's feelings. That's when I spoke. In Mandarin, clear and deliberate. Except the widow understands every word. The look on Robert's face was something I'll remember for the rest of my life. His mouth fell open, color draining from his cheeks. He actually dropped the pen he'd been holding. I turned to Mr. Lu Wei, maintaining my composure even though my heart was hammering. Mr. Lu, I apologize for the deception. I wanted to understand what was really happening with my late husband's company. With our partnership, Mr. Lu Wei's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something close. He inclined his head respectfully. Mrs. Thompson, your Mandarin is excellent. My mother was Chinese American. I grew up hearing it, though I'm admittedly rusty. I've been practicing since Richard died. I took a breath. My husband spent 20 years building a relationship with your family based on mutual respect and fair dealing. I wanted to honor that. I needed to know if that relationship still existed or if it had died with him. Maggie! Robert's voice was strangled. I can explain. I didn't look at him. Mr. Lu, I need to be clear about something. I am not selling my shares. I am not stepping back. And I am absolutely not agreeing to renegotiate the terms of our contracts to cheat your family. Miss Chen leaned forward, her eyes sharp with interest. What are you proposing, Mrs. Thompson? I'm proposing that I buy out Mr. Brennan's shares and continue the partnership my husband began. If you're willing to work with me. I finally looked at Robert. His face had gone from white to red. Robert, you'll want to call your lawyer. Mine will be contacting you this afternoon with terms. You can't do this, he sputtered. You don't know anything about running a business. No, I agreed. But I know how to learn, and I know how to treat partners with respect, which is apparently more than you know. I turned back to Mr. Lu Wei. I understand if you need time to consider. This must be an unusual situation. Jason Lu spoke up for the first time. In English. Mrs. Thompson, may I ask a question? Of course. What was your husband's favorite tea? It was such an unexpected question that I almost smiled. Longjing, traditional green tea from Hangzhou. He said it reminded him of his first trip to China when he met your grandfather. Jason Lu's serious expression finally cracked into a grin. My grandfather served him that tea. He told me the story many times. Mr. Thompson spent an hour learning the proper way to brew it. Grandfather said any man willing to learn showed respect. Mr. Lu Wei nodded slowly. My father spoke of your husband often. He trusted him because Richard Thompson took time to understand our culture, our way of doing business. He learned our language, not to spy or manipulate, but to build bridges. That was Richard, I said softly. He believed in understanding people, not just using them. And you have learned as well, Mr. Liu Wei said. To honor his memory. To continue his work. Mr. Liu Wei exchanged glances with Miss Chen and Jason. Some silent communication passed between them. Then he turned to me and extended his hand. Mrs. Thompson, we would be honored to continue our partnership with you. Your husband's company is in good hands. I shook his hand, feeling tears prick my eyes for the first time that morning. Thank you. Robert stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. Maggie, you're making a huge mistake. You have no idea what you're doing. Mr. Liu Wei's voice cut through the room like ice. Mr. Brennan, you attempted to deceive us, to cheat your partner's widow, and to renegotiate contracts in bad faith. In China, we have a saying, trust is like a mirror. Once broken, you can never look at it the same way again. You have broken that mirror. I'll sue, Robert threatened. The company is half mine. Actually, I said calmly, according to the partnership agreement Richard drew up, which I'm sure you remember, any partner attempting to defraud the company or engage in bad faith negotiations with key partners can be bought out at fair market value minus damages. My lawyer will be very interested in what was discussed here today. Robert's face went through several shades of red and purple. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed toward the door, then turned back. You'll fail. You'll run that company into the ground within a year, and then you'll wish you'd taken my offer. Perhaps, I said. But at least I'll fail with my integrity intact. He slammed the door on his way out. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Jason Liu started to laugh, a surprised burst of sound that broke the tension. Apologies, he said, still grinning, but that was the most satisfying business meeting I've ever attended. Miss Chen allowed herself a small smile. Indeed. Mrs. Thompson, you have your husband's courage. And your mother's wisdom, Mr. Liu Wei added in Mandarin. The rest of the meeting went better than I could have hoped. We discussed the existing contracts, the future of the partnership, the challenges ahead. I was honest about my lack of experience, but also about my willingness to learn, to hire good people, to honor what Richard had built. As we were leaving, Mr. Liu Wei pulled me aside. Mrs. Thompson, may I offer some advice? Please, do not let anyone tell you what you cannot do because of your age or your background. My own mother took over our family business when my father died. Everyone said she would fail. She ran it for 30 years and tripled its size. He smiled. Stubborn women who prove everyone wrong are valuable in business. The world needs more of them. That was 4 months ago. I won't pretend it's been easy. Learning to run an import-export company at 64 is like learning to swim by jumping into the ocean. I've made mistakes. I've had to hire 3 consultants, a new CFO, and an entire team I'm still learning to trust. But the company is stable. The Liu partnership is stronger than ever, and I wake up every morning with a purpose that has nothing to do with what everyone expected of me. Robert tried to fight the buyout, of course. His lawyers sent threatening letters, claimed I'd somehow tricked him, that the whole thing was a setup. But when my lawyer presented recordings from the meeting perfectly legal in our state with at least one party's consent, and yes, I'd consented to recording my own meeting, his case fell apart. He settled for market value, no bonuses, no extras. Last I heard, he's working for a logistics company in Ohio. I'm not going to pretend I'm the same person I was when Richard was alive. That Maggie is gone, buried alongside her husband. This Maggie, the one sitting at the head of the conference table, reviewing shipping manifests and negotiating contracts in Mandarin, she's someone new. Someone I'm still getting to know. Last week, I had coffee with my daughter. She lives in Seattle, works in tech, visits when she can. She kept staring at me across the table like she was seeing me for the first time. Mom, she finally said, I need to apologize. For what? For assuming you'd just, I don't know, fade into being a grandmother and nothing else, for not asking if you wanted something more. I reached across and squeezed her hand. Sweetheart, I didn't know I wanted something more until I found it. That's okay. Dad would be proud. I hope so. I paused. Though he'd probably be annoyed that I'm reorganizing his entire filing system. The man was brilliant, but his organizational skills were terrible. She laughed, And it felt good, normal, like maybe we were finding a new version of ourselves together. I still miss Richard. Every day, I still set 2 places for dinner sometimes, still turn to tell him something and find empty space, but I'm not just his widow anymore. I'm not just someone's mother, someone's wife. I'm Maggie Thompson, CEO of Thompson Import-Export, and I'm learning to build something that's both a tribute to what came before and entirely my own. If you're reading this, or listening, or however you've found this story, and you're sitting in a life that feels too small, too defined by other people's expectations, I want you to know something. It's never too late. You're never too old. You're never too far behind to start learning something new, to reclaim a part of yourself that you thought was gone, to build something that matters. The moment you decide to stop being invisible, to stop letting others speak over you or dismiss you or tell you what you can't do, that's the moment everything changes. I learned Mandarin at 63 because I wanted to understand my husband's legacy and protect it from someone who would destroy it. But what I really learned was that I had never been the quiet art dealer who didn't understand business. I had just never been given the chance to try. Now I'm trying. Some days I succeed. Some days I fail spectacularly. But I'm doing it on my own terms, with my eyes open and my voice clear. And if I can do this, trust me, you can do whatever it is you're afraid to start. The only question is, are you ready to stop being underestimated and start proving everyone wrong? Because I promise you, nothing feels better than the look on their faces when they realize they should have paid attention all along.